Yeah, I wanted to start out by welcoming everybody today. My name is Joe Sanborn with the Music Group. I'm the manager of channel marketing. Today is going to be our fifth X32 webinar, and the topic today is going to be all things related to routing on the X32. So by the end of this webinar, you should have a really good handle on all things related to getting signals in and out of your X32. We have a number of additional topics that are coming up. Even later today, there's going to be a webinar on integrating the X32 with Pro Tools. We're also going to be offering a number of other webinars in the coming weeks, integration with Logic, integration with Reaper, setting up or integrating the S16 with the X32, a separate one on integration of the P16, setting up the X32 to be used as a monitor console and setting up a Q wedge. So if you guys are interested, you can join us for any of those additional webinars that are going to be coming up. Wanted to talk a little bit about the format for today. Basically, these are 2-hour webinars, and the first hour is the actual presentation. So it's generally about 45 minutes to an hour to go through that. And the second hour is where we open it up to questions and live demos, and this is sort of our user group portion of the webinar event. As we're going through this, you'll notice in your Go to My Webinar control panel that there's an area for you to type in questions. So John and Chris are going to be doing the presentation today. As we're going through that, just feel free to type in a question and we'll break in to try to get that answered as we go along. If we happen to miss your question or we've moved on to a different area, the first thing when we get to the second hour is we'll get back to any questions that weren't answered before we move on to additional questions. I want to introduce the two presenters for today. We have John DiNicola on the line. John is our senior product specialist. He lives in New York City. A little bit about John. John has a engineering degree from the University of Hartford, an audio engineering degree. He is also currently works in Big Blue Meanie Studios in New York City, pretty major facility, and John has also been involved with a number of live sound events. We also have Chris Painter on the line. Chris is new to our product specialist team. Chris came over from tech support, and he is currently traveling the country in the U.S. in the X32 van, doing various clinics around the U.S. A little bit about Chris. Chris owns a live sound company. He's been doing this for over 10 years. Does several gigs a week, so he's a very active live sound engineer. So it's great to have Chris on the line. And I also noticed that we have Mario von Helden on the line as well. Special treat, Mario is our senior product specialist in Europe, based in Germany. So it's great to see him with us today as well. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to John DiNicola to go over X32 routing.
Thank you very much, Joe. Hi guys, I'm glad to be here today. I'm really excited about this this webinar in particular because I think by the time we get through this, a lot of you will have a really good handle on how to get your signals in and out of the X32 and how to get it set up for your needs. Just one second here. Okay, great. So here's our agenda for today. I'm going to give you a short introduction on the X32 and the technology behind it for those of you that haven't been on a webinar with us before. We're going to go through some terminology on the X32 on the presentation, and then right after that we're going to jump right into X-Control, which is the PC editor, and I'm going to be showing you lots of things. Me and Chris are going to be talking about routing, and we're going to be showing it to you live. So then we'll go through some examples, such as how to set up two X32s together in a front of house and monitor position, how to do some basic routing for the recording, and how to set up your S16s, which we're very excited about. They'll be coming very soon. And then, well, again, as Joe said, we have an open hour at the end for questions and live demos. So there's the X32, and you'll notice on the logo, we have right there, powered by Midas. So I just want to talk about what that means. Myself and Joe and everyone here from the company on the call, we technically work for the Music Group. And this is a conglomerate of companies starting way back about 23 years ago with Behringer. But also about 3 years ago, we purchased Midas and Clark Technic, and that was a very exciting point for the company. Midas Clark Technic, really big names in the pro audio world, and more recently, we've acquired Turbo Sound as well. So that's our company a little bit. As many of you know, Midas, they know digital mixing second to none. Well, that piece you're looking at right there is the XL8 console, and that's the flagship console for Midas, featuring 432 input channels, weighing well over 1,000 pounds, and costing as much as a decent sized family home in most areas. So that is the technology that we have access to, coming over into the X32. And it's really exciting. Midas definitely knows what live engineers need. You'll see Midas featured on some of the biggest tours, such as Metallica, AC/DC. So a really great heritage that we get to draw on here for the X32. And there's the X32 in our factory being produced. And the Midas connection, one main thing I want to draw on is the mic preamps in the X32. With our relationship with our sister company, Midas Clark Technic, we're able to bring you for the first time, Midas designed mic preamp in a Behringer product. So it's a whole new level of sound quality that for a Behringer mixer, and we're really excited about it. So also coming from Midas Clark Technic is the digital networking technology that makes the digital snake possible. So we'll get into that a little bit more later. And if you have any more questions about that integration, we'll talk about it towards the end. But let's dive right in here. I want to go over some terms on the X32 so that when we're looking at the routing screen, we have an understanding of what the various choices are and what they're referring to. The first term I want to talk about is mix buses. In addition to your main left-right mix and your mono mix buses, you have 16 mix buses on the X32. This would be like your traditionally might be called you might have heard these called in the past aux mixes, but basically this is where you're going to set up your monitor mixes or your sends to effects processors, and you have 16 of these buses inside of the X32. So once you're using mix buses inside of the X32, you of course have to actually route them to outputs. And it's good to know that out of the box, the default routing is the first 14 mix buses go to the first 14 XLR outputs. So you can start building some monitor mixes on the first few mix buses, and you'll be good to go. Just plug out, if you're using mix bus 1, come right out of output 1, and you'll be all set. The next term is AUX, and I know this has been confusing for a lot of people, but when we're talking about the AUXs on the X32, we're actually talking about the 6 balanced ins and outs on the back of the console that are labeled AUX, and you can see a picture of those right there on the bottom of the screen. So these AUX ins and outs are completely separate from the mix buses. Okay, they're just they can be used for various purposes, but it's not. If you're doing for example, if you have a mix on mix bus 1, it's not necessarily going to come out of AUX 1. It's a 2 separate items there. So just wanted to go over that concept. The next term would be matrix. The X32 does feature 6 matrix mixes. And basically, matrices are just mix buses, but instead of being fed from individual channels, they're fed from other mix buses. So any of the 16 buses, in addition to the main left-right, can be mixed to a matrix. These are really useful when you're doing a quick mix. Maybe you need a quick mix for a video feed. And instead of making a mix out of all 32 channels, you can just make a mix out of a couple subgroups, including your main left-right. And but I just bring this up because when you're using a matrix, you're going to have to go to the routing menu and actually choose an output for that matrix, because there are no outputs by default that are dedicated to matrix mixes. So when you're using matrices, you'll have to choose matrix on the output in the routing menu, and we'll go over that. The next term is monitor. You're going to see that as a choice in the routing menu from time to time, and that's referring to the monitor or control room signal. This is the only signal that's affected by the soloing. So if you're connected to the main outputs, of course, and you hit solo, you're not going to hear anything. That's only going to be on the monitor bus. The X32 features dedicated monitor outputs, which is great to have, but maybe you need to route that monitor signal somewhere else. Maybe you're having another Q wedge or something, and you can do that on the routing menu by assigning monitor left or monitor right to a particular pair of outputs. And you'll see on the screen by pressing View by the monitor section of the console, you have some options as far as what goes into that bus and how the soloing works, and even a delay, which is really handy. If you're 100 feet away in front of a house and you're trying to hear you want to time align your headphones to the speakers, it's a great application. And again, that will affect the monitor signal only. So that signal will be coming out of your dedicated monitor outs. You also have the ability to route it elsewhere. The next term is AES50. You're going to see that a lot in the routing menu. That's referring to the two AES50 Ethernet ports on the back of the X32. You would use the AES50 options on the routing menu to send signal to and from your X32 and maybe an S16 or other X32s or any other AES50 device. So that's what you would use the AES50 options for. Another term you're going to see is card. The X32 features a 32 by 32 expansion card slot. Currently, the console ships with the XUF USB Firewire interface in this slot for you. So anytime you're trying to route signal to your DAW, you would have to use the card option. So that's a quick overview, and we're going to keep repeating this stuff again so that it's easy to understand. But now we're going to jump right into a live demo portion. I'm going to leave the presentation and pull up the X-Control software to make it easy for you all to see. And now I'm going to turn it over to Chris for a few minutes. Can you see it there, Chris?
I can see it, John.
Excellent. So basically what Chris is going to do is we're going to take you through the routing menu, page by page, and we're going to explain all your options. And once we do that, and we're very familiar with the different pages of the routing menu, then I'm going to jump back in and we're going to get into some applications and some implications and workarounds and all sorts of routing tricks. So Chris, if you want to get us started here on the home page.
Yeah, absolutely. Can everybody hear me okay?
I can hear you great, thanks.
Thanks, John. Okay, so starting with the routing menu, obviously you got the routing button on the side, to the right of the screen there. So you hit that routing button, and the home screen is the first screen that comes up. So you see rows of your inputs, 1 through 8, 9 through 16, 17 through 24, 25 through 32. This is where you're going to route what source is going to the channels on your X32. So if you're plugging in mics on the back of the X32, you would select local 1 through 8, 9 through 16, 17 through 24. The point is that those would all line up 1 to 1. So when you plug in channel 9 on the back, it'll show up on channel 9 on the X32. Cool. So yeah, let me get in the groove here. Next thing down is AES50. So you'll see how you have AES50, 1 through 8, 9 through 16, and then there's A and B. So this refers to the AES50 ports on the back of the X32. You have 2 ports, A and B. So ideally, this is if you had 2 S16s, or even say you have 6 S16s at the most. You can have up to 3 S16s connected to each port, A and B, on the back. Now, I'll point out right now that you can have, no more than 40 channels inputs routed through the mixer at one time, but you can have up to 166 inputs connected if you include 6 S16 boxes and the inputs on the back. It all adds up. So anyways, I digress. Let's move on. Next is your card inputs. So this is used if you are playing channels back from your DAW, for example, and you're connected via the FireWire. So if you're playing back channels from the computer into the X32, this is where you would select the card going to the channels on X32. So if I want channels 1 through 8 in, say, Pro Tools, for example, to show up on channels 1 through 8 on the X32, I would pick 1 through 8 right there where John has his mouse. Yeah, so
Yeah, that's great,
you can
Chris.
actually,
And before we jump to the next page, sorry to cut you off there, but of course you can mix and match here. So if you want to have 16 inputs from Pro Tools and maybe do 16 mic inputs, you can line that up. But just remember, notice how I select like local 1 through 8 here under input 17 through 32. If I select that, that means that mic input 1 is going to input 17. So just remember that's how flexible the routing here is. That if you wanted it to be 1 to 1, you could just pick local 17 to 24. That might make more sense for you. So just keep that in mind.
totally. If I could throw out a couple more scenarios, um, say you have one S16 box, and it's on the other side of the stage. You could pick AS50, for channels 1 through 16, and then have local 1 through 8, or 1 through 16 be assigned to 17 through 20, 17 through 32. So yeah, the point is they're in blocks of 8 to start with, and it's really flexible. You could have 8 channels. You could be a band and you're having 8 channels come back from the DAW as backing tracks on channels 1 through 8, for example. 9 through 16 could be from an S16 box that maybe the keyboard player has because he's got 8 inputs going to it or something. And then you could have your other 16 channels be for microphones connected to the back. Really, really flexible. So one more thing we want to talk about, if you think it's okay to move on, John,
Yeah.
is the aux inputs. These are really flexible. These refer to what's going in the aux inputs on the back, what you're routing to that. Local 1 through 4 would be the actual physical connections on the back.
Actually, local 1 through 4, what that would do, Chris, is it would actually route your mic preamps would come in on layer 3, as an aux in. So let's say, for example, you're in a recording scenario and you want to do an overdub, but you're mixing on the X32, so all of your 32 input channels are filled up with card inputs, right? I'll even show it to you on this example. So we have card inputs coming in, 17 to 24, all the way to 32. And I just want to overdub a vocal track, but I don't have any more input channels. Well, now I can go to my third layer here on the input side where my auxiliaries pop up. And instead of sourcing them from aux 1 through 4, which is where that would normally be the TRS inputs on the back, I can select local. I can select local 1 through 4. And now if I select my aux channel, it'll become I'll have access to my mic preamp gain as I'm showing you here. So it's really flexible, and you can also likewise you can bring in 4 channels of computer playback. Maybe if you're using all the local mic pre's and you want to just you want to return stereo playback from your computer. Well, there you go. Choose card 1 through 4, and then you'd be able to then your stereo output would come up on these first 2 aux channels.
And you still have all 32 inputs on the back still to work with.
Yeah, exactly. So that's choosing your inputs. And before we go on to the outputs back to Chris here, I just want to mention that once you've chosen your inputs, you can patch things around. So if you're not completely locked into this bank of 8 system. So for example, I have all my card inputs selected right now. So I could choose any channel, let's say channel 1, and I can go to its configuration screen, which on your console you could get to by pressing View near the mic preamp gain knob. And I have this menu that says Source, giving me the ability to patch any of those 32 channels that we just chose into that channel. And you'll see there's my 32 cards. There's my auxes. that we just set up coming from a card. So you do have some further flexibility, after that page. But what's going to be in your source menu is going to be determined directly from what you've selected in these 5 menus. So, Chris, why don't we move on to the outputs now?
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. So moving on to the next tab is the outputs, and this page is where you specifically assign what source is going out of your 16 outputs on the back. Analog outputs 1 through 16. So right now, channel output number 1 is selected, and as you basically move over, keep in mind that on the mixer itself, you'll have the knobs below each section. But since John is on X control, he's got the mouse that he can actually click right on the menu there. But so yeah, using the knobs on the mixer, this is where you start to find the category and the channel that you're routing. So for category, you see you have main, LRC, left, right, center, mix bus, matrix, direct out, monitor. This basically is a shortcut to go directly to the column on the right, to the right of that. So if you click matrix or direct out, it goes directly to that section in the list. So the point is, you can select any of these going to that single output. So I can pick any channel's direct output to go out of output 1. I could pick any of the 6 matrices, the mix bus, left and right, or center. Every single output is assignable to exactly what you want to send out of it. In addition to that, every output to the right of that, you have the tap where you're tapping this, pre-EQ or post-EQ. So this is if you want the output to be pre or post, before or after the equalizer, or pre-fader, post-fader, after the fader. So for, say you're sending to an external effects processor, you'd want that to be post-fader so that when you turn the fader down, the channel down, it kills the output going to the effect. If this was a monitor mix, you'd of course always want those to be pre-fader. And it depends on the monitor engineer. If he wants if you're using the board for monitors only, you'd probably want this to be post EQ. A lot of times, if you're using the board for front of house as well, you want it to be pre EQ for monitor sends. It really depends on the guy driving, I guess. In addition to that, you have the delay for each output. So this is where you can, every single output, you have individual time delay, feet, meters, milliseconds. I really like that it's in feet because I've used this a few times where one thing John mentioned earlier was timelining headphones. I realized I was standing at front of house, exactly 25 feet from the speaker, which was really close, but it's what I had to work with at the gig last week. And I just set that to 25 feet, and I've never really even got to try that before. It was pretty cool. I mean, really loud, noisy, echoey room anyways, but I think that made a difference. So, timelining individual outputs. If you've got speakers that are, say you've got a band playing or a DJ playing and you've got speakers way in the back of the room, those speakers may need to be timelined. I guess it depends which way they're facing, but yeah, there's lots of applications for that. We don't need to get into all of them. Awesome. Should we go to the next tab, John, or do you think I missed anything?
No, that's pretty great. That was a really great overview, and I like that example about the the monitor engineers with pre and post EQ. That's great. Another application for that is going to be if you want to route something out of the X32 post channel strip. Like we've had a lot of questions about. I want to send back even sending your main mix back, or if you want to send back if you're recording and you want to record after the dynamics and EQ. You could, route a post fader direct out from any channel, and we'll show you how to do that. I don't want to get too into it yet. That's one of my examples, but this is a very important and powerful page, and you'll see why as we move on.
Cool. All right, the aux outputs. So these are referring specifically to the 6 outputs on the back, the 1/4-inch balanced outputs. Also the digital ASEBU digital output on the back. So this is where you're assigning what source is going to those outputs. So as you see, channels 1 through 6, and as well as ASCBU. The category, you can pick this as an insert. You can assign main, left, right, any of the mix buses, any of the 6 matrices, any direct out of any channel could also be here on these AUX outputs, or the ASCB outputs monitor section.
Basically,
So
it mirrors.
let's
It
have a few
basically mirrors the
examples
last
before I
page.
go. Right.
So,
It mirrors the last page.
so what I was going
And
to
as far
say
as
is that is it basically because those are balanced quarter-inch jacks or TRS jacks on the back, really you're getting an additional 6 outputs. You know, it's just on a different connector, and you have all the same options on these as you do for the analog outputs, with one addition. You'll notice that category of insert. That would give you the ability to integrate with. You'll notice on the X32 when I showed you the picture of the aux ins and outs that they're right on top of each other, almost like a patch bay. So if you have like a favorite piece of outboard gear, you can connect it to the ins and outs of a particular aux, and then make that aux an insert. So it's a cool way to get your, you have a nice
Yeah,
distro.
John, if you could elaborate just for a few seconds, because I know that the aux ins and outs in the back can definitely be kind of confusing for some people, and I think that that's a great example where you could use these as inserts. You know, let's say you've got a nice 1176 or a distressor, or some nice outboard compressor limiter. That's a great use for those aux ins and outs. I think where some of the confusion can come in is that on some mixing boards we refer to an aux as an aux send, but these are so if you want to just elaborate maybe a little bit on that, as far as the distinctions on those aux ins and outs and in the routing.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, what you're looking at right now is the config screen for a channel. And on the very right hand side is where you can do an insert. So of course you can insert any of our internal processors, and you'll see those all come up. But you'll notice underneath of those, you have aux 1 through 6. So if I chose aux 1, what basically has just happened is that now that aux 1 in and out on the back of the console, the physical TRS out, is now my insert point basically. And so you'd be able to come out of that aux out into your distressor, and then out of your distressor into the aux in, and you've just created an insert loop using the aux output. So it's a really cool additional use for those if you have some outboard gear like that. You could also insert these on a mix bus as well, the exact same procedure. So if you want to use a bus compressor, I can go to this subgroup over here and I can do the exact same thing. Just insert, aux 1. Same procedure that you would do for a channel. So I think that pretty much covers the aux outs for now. Chris, you want to talk about the next tab here?
Yeah. Okay, so P16. This is obviously for our personal monitoring system, our P16 systems. Hopefully everybody's already familiar with that for the most part. But either way, it's integrated directly into the X32. And we have this P16 page here specifically to route whatever we want from the mixer, any source of the mixer, to the P16 buses. And that's actually something to point out. This is basically 16 more buses in its own way. That can be used in actually more ways than just for a P16 system. But so P16 on the digital out, P16 channel 1. This is where you can pick any of the, just like the other pages, analog page and the aux out page. You have category and which signal and where you're tapping it. So for P16, you have 16 channels to work with for your monitor mix that you're sending to everybody. So you can pick direct outputs. You could actually pick a bus if there's more than 16 channels you're trying to get into the 16 channels of the P16 system. You could bus something, and that's basically it for that.
For anybody who, excuse me, hasn't looked into the P16 system, it's really it's an incredible system. It's a 16-channel discrete monitoring system. So each musician in a recording studio, say you're recording a whole rhythm section, each musician would get a P16M mixer and have the ability to create their own headphone mix, or in a live environment they could use these on stage. And say the lead singer is using inner monitors on the back of the P16M, there's line outs, so they could totally dial in their own mix, right from stage, using these little cost-effective P16Ms. And it's great that this is totally integrated into the X32. The X32 is going to be it's a whole series of products that are all going to work together. The S16 stage boxes, the P16Ms. So on the P16M, they basically use Ultranet, and that's a dedicated port on the back of the X32. If you're using our S16, these 16 buses that are feeding the P16 also feed down that single Cat5 wire down AES50. So, in a live environment, you just have the X32 at front of house position. You run one Cat5 wire down to your stage, and you go into a couple of S16s, and you have a dedicated Ultranet port to feed this P16 bus. So it's really, really flexible. I mean, you have the 16 buses plus these 16 dedicated P16 buses. So it's kind of like having a 32 bus console.
Hey, can I throw in a question from a end user that would just popped in here?
Sure.
Is the routing patch page saved from scene to scene? And yes, it is. If you when you store a scene, you can save all your routing information too.
Yes, exactly.
We'll take John. Why don't we'll take a look at that either now or at the end, as far as checking the different things that would be saved. But
Yeah, we're gonna
totally
show that in a little bit. So we'll get more into that. Thank you, Chris. And so that's the
Should
piece.
we move on to card out?
Yeah, basically that's the P16 page, and again, that's gonna, for the most part, will be determining what's going out of your Ultranet out port. But like Chris said, there's some other tricky uses for these that we're gonna show you in a few minutes. But before we do, these next three tabs are going to be really important for us to understand, and you'll start to see why I'm saying that these P16 out page and the analog out page are so crucial. And here we are on the card out page. Take it away, Chris.
Cool. So this is where you're assigning what sources are going to the card out. And the card out, I mean the FireWire and the USB XUF card on the back of the X32. So right now, we have local 1 through 8, 9 through 16 selected. So that means the inputs on the back are being routed to the output of the card. So if you're recording 32 channels in your DAW, all 32 channels right now are routed straight into the computer, one-to-one.
Yes, and it's important to mention that this is going to be independent of any patching that you did on the inputs of the console. So let's say that you have your kick drum plugged into mic input 1, but it's routed to channel 10. It's going to show up, it's going to show up as number 1 on this output page because it's a direct out of the actual mic input 1. So just keep that in mind, that these local 1 through 8s are referring to the physical local mic inputs.
Thanks, John. That's a really good point. So in addition to that, you can also select AES50 as a source. So if this is a live recording, for example, or in a studio where you've got S16s in a different location, you can pick AES50 as your source going to the card out, going into the DAW. So AES50, AES50B, you've got both ports available. Now card. Card out P16 and AUX 1 through 6. John, do you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. The card 1 through 8, card all the way card 1 to 32 is basically going to be routing the input of your card to the output of your card. I can't think of an application off the top of my head for the XUF card, but you have to keep in mind that there's going to be other cards coming out in the future that this may pertain to. So we have that option there for you. So that's the card. Now here's my favorite part. You have out 1 through 8 and 9 through 16, and you have P16 1 through 8 and 9 through 16. Okay, so what these are referring to, when you select out 1 through 8 and out 9 through 16, these are referring to what you set up on the analog out page. Okay, so right now I have mix bus 1 coming out of output 1 on the analog out page. So if I go to card out and I select output 1 through 8, then what I'm going to be seeing is mix bus 1 on that first channel, because that's what's assigned on the other page. Now this is really powerful because this really gives you the ability to basically send anything out of the card output. One thing people mentioned is, how do I get my main mix from Pro Tools, or my main mix out of the console back into my Pro Tools rig? Well, you would just select your output 1 through 8, and then just make sure that your main mix was assigned to a pair of those outputs. So I can assign it to pair 1, 2, and I have main, left, right, and now my first two outputs, which would be my first two inputs when I'm looking at my DAW, are going to contain my main, left, and right. Likewise, if you wanted to record a channel post fader, maybe you like the dynamics on the X32. I actually really like the compressor when you slam it on a drum bus. If you want to record that, same idea. You can actually go to the analog out page and say I want to do my kick and snare, post fader. I can do output 3, direct out. I got my kick on channel 1, and I can say, post fader or post EQ, and now the signal going to the DAW is actually going to be post channel strips. You'll get the EQ and dynamics and such. So that's kind of how that works with the out 1 through 8 and the out 9 through 16. In a live scenario, you'd want to have. We'll get into that on the AS50 page, but you'll notice right below the outs are the P16 options. Now that's why Joe was discussing other uses for the P16. Maybe in the studio maybe you don't have a P16 and you're using all of your analog outputs because you're feeding headphone amps for your performers' headphone mixes. Well, you can assign something to the P16 output. Let's say again that kick drum. We could go direct out of that kick drum channel, post fader coming from channel 1, and now I can assign the P16 output to the card out, and the signal is going to go through just like it would if you use the out. So the P16 and the out pretty much work exactly the same way. Okay, and you actually have the same option on AUX 1 through 6. Same thing applies. Whatever you assign on the AUX out tab is what's going to be showing up here on AUX 1 through 6. So it's not going to be your first monitor mixes. It's not going to be your first 6 mix buses. It's going to be whatever you have connected on the AUX out page. So really flexible going on there. So let's go. Let's cover the AES50 outputs real quickly, and then we'll get into a couple more examples.
Can I jump back in, John?
Absolutely.
Cool. AS50A, AS50B. So this is where you're assigning what sources are going to your AS50A and AS50B outputs. This is if you have S16s connected, basically, to the back of the X32. You can...
Excuse me, Chris.
Yep.
I just wanted to point out, I don't remember if you guys covered this, but the AES50 we have an A port and a B port, so this is basically 96 channels down a single Cat5 wire. And the way that we utilize it on the X32 and S16 product categories is we're using it for 48 inputs and 48 outputs down a single AES50 connection. We can do that because the X32 operates at 44.1 or 48 kilohertz. So I just wanted to point out in case anybody was not up on AES50.
Totally. Thanks, Joe. I should have said that in the beginning anyways. You're right. So anyways, 48 channels to work with. That's how we fit the P16 channel in there. John, if we can scroll up, show from the top AS50A output 1 through 8. So local 1 through 8. This is where you would assign the inputs on the back of the X32 to channels of AES50.
That's great for a front of house or monitor. If you have your X32, two X32s, and you're sending from one, say all your mics are plugged into the monitor console, you would want to set the AES50 output so that you were sending out all of your mic signals down the pipe to the next X32, and then they would be able to pull those in at front of house. So that's one example of using the local.
Yeah, John, that's a great example, and that's
Yeah.
something that people discovered right away with the X32 is, even if you're not using S16s, if you put an X32 at monitor position and you have all your, usually your monitor console is on the side of the stage, and you could have all of your stage inputs coming into that monitor console, and then you're basically just using AES50 to get those signals, up to the front of house console. Of course, the gain control is being controlled by the monitor console. So, I mean, in a lot of applications, that would actually work pretty well as long as you have a good relationship with your monitor engineer. But yeah, it's definitely it's a great use for AES50.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Joe.
If I could add something to that, you do still have plus or minus 12, I believe, at front of house. If you do that, it's
Yeah.
just a trim.
Yep.
Exactly.
I think that I haven't tried that yet, but I think that would pretty much make it, more than usable, more than adequate. You know what I mean? And if you have a monitor engineer, obviously, obviously he should know how to set mic preamps if he's there to be a monitor engineer. Hopefully.
Yeah.
So AS50B is basically a mirror image of AS50A. You have all the same options for AS50B that you have for AS50A.
Yeah, exactly. And just real quick before we leave this page, some of the other options here, like if you wanted to route, why would you use AES50, for example, to AES50? Well, maybe you're using three X32s. Okay, so you did on the first one, you did it this way. So now you have the signal at your second X32, which is going to be front of house. And say you want to send that to a third X32 to do a broadcast mix. Well, since your inputs on your front of house console aren't coming from local, they're coming from AES50. Well, there you go. Just set AES50 just like you did on that monitor console, and now you're going to basically be forwarding that signal on to the next X32, and that's where you would do that by using the AES50 options. Of course, you also have the ability to send your card returns, and you have your friendly out 1 through 8 and P16 1 through 8 that are customly assignable. Okay.
John, somebody's asking about working in blocks of 8. Saying 1-to-1 would be more flexible, even though it would be more work to set up. You want to address that?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, of course, why exactly they did it this way. But basically, like I've been going over, you'd be surprised how you can kind of work around that setup. And I think they just felt like this still gives you a ton of different routing options without making it, too cumbersome. I do see your frustration, in some ways where it would be nice to pull one thing at a time. But like I said, with the ability to patch your inputs around and to utilizing the aux, the aux ins and outs and changing things, or you can usually work around it. And during the questions period, if you have a specific scenario, I'd love to try to tackle it with you. So definitely come back at us with a question. If you want me to show you a different way to a way to route it.
John, we're getting a number of questions in regards to the FireWire and the USB connection on the back, and I just want to say whether you're using FireWire or USB, either at 44.1 or at 48 kilohertz, you're getting a full 32 in and 32 out down that single wire. So you're not limited if you're working up at 48 on that. Sorry to interrupt, but there was like 3 questions in a row on that. So
No, that's fine. Thank you, Joe. Okay, guys. So now that we've gone through everything page by page, I just want to talk about a couple of routing tricks. The first thing I want to talk about is presets. As Chris answered before, everything in your routing menu can be saved as a scene, and by default, it's going to be part of your scenes. But you also might want to have just routing presets, just dedicated for routing scenarios. So, and that's possible on the X32. You actually have 100 different separate routing presets that you can save. So if you're in the routing menu, all you have to do is press utility, and you now have the option to save and load routing presets. And you'll see on the left it says recall patching scope. And here is where you would choose, well, what pages of the routing menu do you want to save? Do you just want the inputs so that when you recall a routing preset, your analog, your outputs stay the same? Or do you want everything? So you could check everything here. If I have everything checked, my routing preset that I save will be complete. And you have 100 of those. So like one example might be like Chris said, you have 6 S16s hooked up because you got a festival going on, and 2 bands on the stage at a time, and you could have different routing presets that tell the console, okay, for this scene, for this preset, I want to pull the first S16, and then the next band comes on. Okay, load the next preset, and it will automatically go to the next S16, and so on. So that's one useful
yeah,
application.
another a great application for that too is in the installation world. You're not limited to just using 2 S16s to get a full 32 in by 16 out. You could use additional S16s, and then let's say you're doing a theater installation, and there's different areas of the theater that they use at different times. Maybe the entryway has a wall plate with a bank of inputs, but you only use them for an overflow area, or occasionally you set up a powered speaker out there or whatever. You could basically wire those all into one central location with a bunch of S16s, and then basically use it as like a digital patch-based system. And then, as John's indicating here, just create presets to address those different ins or outs or whatever you need on additional S16s. So it's very flexible.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Joe.
There could be, if I could add a couple more examples, there could be a band you work with all the time, and they have a certain playback system from a computer or whatever it is, or they have routing, certain things they have within your monitors, and you can save the preset for that band, or you could even save the scene, with your mix and everything, and all the routing could be part of that too. You could have an AV environment that you always end up, with lots of wireless mics and an AV environment where you might have a routing scene that you use for that, a way to prime the system so you're ready for that kind of gig, whatever. Just thought I'd throw a couple more examples in there.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, great. Thanks. So now that we've kind of really gone through the routing menu, I'm hoping that by now some of you guys are starting to get a grasp on what these different terms are and what the different things that you can do, and start, definitely think about if there's any actual scenario you want to throw at us, just type it into the question box, and we'll discuss how we can do it. And a couple things.
John,
Yeah.
did you go over the using the P16 for processing channels, post effects, that type of thing?
Yeah, I did. We talked about it. I'm going to show that again, actually, just to really drive it home. So, people, we had the question already about, why is it in banks of 8? And certainly this can be inconvenient for certain applications, but there are a lot of ways around it. So, one great example is somebody wrote the other day to us and asks, well, if I'm doing a mix from Pro Tools and I want to mix on the X32 with 32 channels all at once, but then I want to do some overdubbing, how can I listen to 32 channels on the card, and overdub at the same time? And, because it's in banks of 8, I can't just say, I think what he wanted to do was do maybe 30 tracks of record input and another 2 tracks for the mic. But since we have this flexible routing, like the example I said before, here's the setup for that. You have card, 32 inputs a card, and then you just change your aux in 1 to 4 to local 1 to 4. Okay? And remember, in this scenario, so now he can control those mics. If he's laying a background vocal overdub, for example, he has control over his first 4 microphone inputs right on that third layer where aux 1 through 4 come in. These now are mic channels because you've selected local 1 to 4 here. And as far as getting that recording into Pro Tools, you don't have to do any other work, because if your card out is set to local, you're still plugged into a physical mic preamp on the board. So you would just leave it set at local 1 through 8. And now you have full monitoring of your 32 channels. And at the same time, you can still track through the board. So I thought that was a cool example. And one more topic, like Joe said, is getting stuff out of the box. We've had a lot of requests for people that want to record the channel strip. It's actually, the channel strip is pretty impressive. Like I mentioned before, I really like the dynamics section. You can really do a lot of different things with it. And so maybe you want to record that. Well, you'll notice on the card out page, there really isn't anywhere where I can say pre or post fader. It's pretty much just going to be a direct out of my local mic inputs. So let's say I have a studio where I don't have a P16 system, and I'm using my first 8 analog outputs already because I'm doing headphone mixes, from my board, and they're feeding headphone amps for the talent in the different rooms. And so those are out of the question. How many channels can I get post fader into the console? Well, the answer is, even if you're using the first 8, you can get 24 channels in post fader. And here's how you could do it. On card out, I'm just going to select, let's do it the other way around. So we'll go to the P16 out, and we'll just make this really simple. Actually, by default, your P16 outputs are all assigned to the first 16 direct channel outs. So let's say that's what we're recording. We have a 16 drum. We're recording a drum set. We got 16 mics plugged in, and we want everything to be post channel strip. I would just have to go in here. The only thing I'd have to change is to make this change this tap. So you could do a post fader tap and get everything, or you could do a post EQ tap. And if you just want to see what that looks like, you can go to the home page of a channel, and you see we have the EQ right here. So a post EQ tap in this scenario would be right before the dynamics and after the EQ. And you're saying to yourself, oh man, well, I wanted to get both. Well, you can actually put your dynamics before the EQ, and now look, your post EQ tap is going to be right before your fader, which is probably the ideal situation when you're recording, because you really don't need a fader to dictate your level to Pro Tools. So, basically, now that I've assigned these post EQ taps on every single P16 out, I basically have 16 channels. My first 16 channels, instead of choosing local 1 through 8 and 9 through 16, I'm just going to choose P16 1 to 8, P16 9 to 16, and there you go. Now I have 16 channels post fader going right into my Pro Tools or Logic or whatever DAW you're using. And you can do the same thing with those analog outputs. Remember, in the example, I said that we're only using 8 outputs, and we have another 8 left. So let's say we got a really big drum plot. We got 20 mics going. Let's go back to the analog out tab, and I could do the exact same thing. I can individually assign the direct outputs from my channels with a post fader or a post EQ tap, and I can go to my card out, and I can select on my third bank of card outs, out 9 through 16. So you see, you actually can definitely get signals into the console post fader by working this way, which I think is a pretty cool thing. It's also a way to route stuff out via AES 50. Anything you want to send down to another console, you could assign it to a P16 channel or an output channel, and that's how you get it there.
I also, something we really didn't talk about, John, and I know that some people have been talking about the Waves multi-rack type thing, where you can they've created a shell program that's super low latency so that you could use Waves plugins inserted. It's like if you're tying up your USB or your FireWire port using that in that scenario to use other plugins, say on the backs of the S16 stage boxes there are ADAT direct outputs, because the mic pre's are located inside of the S16s on stage. So it's just another way to tap into and expand the system, to a more powerful system. If you have a radar system down on stage, or a Pro Tools rig or whatever, you could just tap in and record that way as well for even more connectivity. With that said, we're coming up on the end of the first hour, so we're through the presentation, and I know we're getting a few questions for some demos.
Yeah, I can see
One
that.
one is, can you demo how the home routing setting page can change from scene to scene?
Yeah, sure. So basically, let's do our first scene. We'll just have it be kind of a default scenario where your mic preamps are all going to be coming in channels 1 through 32. And maybe I've done a number of other things. You can see I have my channel strips labeled and everything. So I would press the view button near the scenes area of the console, and you would actually see this home screen is what you'd see on the console. Now, remember, by default, when you're saving a scene, and I want to cover this because it has been a source of confusion for a lot of people. When you're saving a scene on the X32, the default setting is that it saves everything. Your channel names, your EQ settings, your routing setup, everything on the board will be saved. You'll notice on the right, you have the ability to save certain things from the scene. Okay, so if you wanted to exclude something, like maybe you're going to a different venue and you don't want to mess up their routing, so you could exclude your routing from the scene. But I just wanted to mention this because I know some people have kind of just saw a scene save real quick and thought that meant save and clicked all of these. And of course, if you click
Right.
all of these, you're not going to save anything. So that's been
Yeah, really vitally important. And I know that we did get some posts on the forums this week about the use of the word save with a V versus safe with an F. And it wasn't translating into certain languages. So yeah, it's vitally important. But as John said, you can prevent it from saving and overwriting various functions.
right. So getting back to the question. Remember, I changed my routing preset so that I have I have all my routing set to local inputs, and I have not selected anything in the save. So I'm going to do a total snapshot. I'm going to save the settings. You would do that by pressing the rotary encoder underneath that box on the X32 itself. So I'm going to save this as default number 2. I'm going to press save, and now I have that scene here. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my routing menu and set up something a little bit different. Let's say S16 is coming in on first bank of channels. Then I want to use some local mic preamps for my wireless mic inputs. And I got 8 tracks of backing music coming from Pro Tools, so let's bring that in. And we'll leave the last 4 on local inputs, 25 through 32, in case we need extra mic ins. So now I've changed this. I'm going to save a new scene. We'll go to View, select another slot, save our settings to default 3. And now that that's saved, of course my routing hasn't changed. Here's the routing setup I had. Okay, so now I want to go back. I want to bring everything back to normal again. Let's just go back to our scene area. We'll go back to scene default 2. We'll press go. We're going to load our scene. And now when I click routing, there you go. Everything is back to where it was. Local 1 through 8, 9 through 16, 17 through 24, and 25 through 32. So that's how you do it when it's with scenes. Now remember, if you don't want to record a whole snapshot, you could just press utility right here, and you could save a routing preset. And again, and this is kind of a little confusing, but this is the opposite of the scenes where you'd actually would want to check these boxes because of the word scope right here. So by checking all those, now I'm saving every page of a routing into a preset.
John, due to my lag in my system that we've been working on, are you on the live camera right now?
I have it set up. Yep.
Maybe go to the live camera just to switch it up a little bit. I know X Control gives us a nice clear picture of the routing, but some people might want to actually see it with the encoders and the actually doing it on the console.
Okay, great. And let us know how we're doing. If the lag on this camera is unbearable, we'll switch out of it, but I think it should be okay. So, Joe, can you filter me another question, please?
Yeah, let's see. Next one. I have a question. Can you use the aux knob to assign the effects? If so, can you give a demonstration on how to assign effects to each individual channel and how to assign the output to a fader and the actual effect to a knob? Um, John, maybe just dig in a little bit about using sends in a typical live environment. I think a lot of people are getting into a newer mentality where you're using a digital audio workstation and possibly sometimes inserting an effect on an individual channel. So if you want to go through that whole scenario, that'd be great, John.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. We didn't really, obviously, most of this is in the routing menu, but certainly routing to the effects is pretty important. So when you're looking at the effects screen, and I think you guys have a pretty decent picture of that, and may be familiar with it. This is like imagine having a real effects rack with 8 processors in it, okay, and maybe you have a really nice reverb, like a nice Lexicon 480 or something. You're not going to want to just insert that on one channel. In most cases, you're probably going to want to maybe use it on all of your reverb or all of your vocals, let's say. Well, how do you do that? You do that by busing all of your vocals to a bus and then setting that bus to a reverb and then returning it. So that's why on the X32, the first 4 effects processors are connected to your to buses, and those are going to be buses 13 through 16 by default. Okay, so if you taking the X32 out of the box and you haven't messed with the routing at all, and you want to hear a reverb, let's say, all you have to do is select the channel. And actually, I'm going to let me just. I'll use you can see my second reverb I'm not using for anything right now. It's actually the Hall plugin. So let's send something to the Hall and see if we can get it going. Okay, so I'm going to select this channel here. I believe it's a vocal, but either way, we have some signal coming in. We want to get it to that Hall reverb. So that Hall reverb is on bus 14 by default because it's the second effect slot. So I just go up to my bus sends area. I can press 13 through 16. And hey, you'll notice I already have it going to my delay and my other reverb, but my second encoder is all the way down. So notice because I have this on 13 through 16, this encoder is the send for bus 14. So you'll notice as I turn this up, now we're hitting that reverb. Just like that. You can see the Hall, probably hitting it just a little too hard actually, but I wanted it to be really obvious. So that's all I had to do.
John, I was going to mention, and forgive me for anybody who's an experienced engineer. I know we have people from all different backgrounds on these webinars, and just wanted to throw that out there. I remember when I first started mixing and I started using effects. It kind of runs through your head. How do I use them? What do I put them on? You know what I mean? Do I stick this great reverb that I just bought on the master bus and send everything, to the reverb, or how do I use effects in general? And I just wanted to throw a few pointers out. I mean, in the live environment, as John just indicated, you're just sending certain instruments, say, to a reverb. When I mixed live shows, I used to always have a dedicated vocal reverb and a dedicated drum reverb, and maybe a couple of digital delays, for certain solo instruments that were happening. So, my vocal reverb, obviously, I was only using it on the vocal channel. So I would just send it on in our case, a bus send, and then that would feed any of my vocal channels, primarily the lead singer, the person that you want to sound great with a little bit of reverb on them, so they don't sound too dry. But I wouldn't want to send all of my instruments through that same reverb because everything's going to start to sound like a big mushy mess, The other one, the drum reverb, I might only use that. I tended to just use it primarily on the snare drum of the drum kick. Usually you have a kick drum mic, a snare drum mic, a hi-hat mic. All the tom-toms have individual mics, maybe a set of overheads above the drum kit. And I would only use that drum reverb primarily because the guy is only going to hit his snare drum on 2 and 4 usually, So there's a lot of space in between those snare drum hits. And I might just put a little bit of reverb to make his snare drum sound a little bit bigger. Maybe a tiny taste of it on the tom-toms. So that's why you typically use effects in this bus send type of scenario. Now, once the signal is getting to your effects processors, typically in the old days, you took the output of those individual effects processors and you returned those into channels on the mixing board so that you could adjust with faders how much reverb or delay you wanted, or you could quickly mute the effects if you wanted to, or EQ, that return coming back from the reverb, take a little bit of the high end off of it, that type of thing. So that's just a few pointers on how to use effects in general.
Yeah, and there's two more things I want to mention that has now be about this before we move on, is that in this example, because we're using a bus to send to the effects processor, there's one more step that you want to check on. You want to make sure that the bus master for that bus is actually turned up. So right here you can see I have buses. I'm going to select bus 9 through 16. And there you can see my bus 14. See the meter slam in there because I'm sending that vocal really hot. That's the master for bus 14. So if I took this fader, I'm going to try to actually show you. Now keep an eye on the levels of that hitting that second reverb processor. If I drop the fader on bus 14, nothing's getting to the reverb processor because the master bus send is down. So that's something to check. That might be one of the reasons why, if you're routing everything right and you're wondering why you're not hitting the reverb, make sure you have your bus master turned up. And I would leave that at Unity at 0 dB in this application. And the last and
Yeah, and
final
also
thing you
we
need to
really didn't
remember
get
is that
into at all,
it's great that you've gotten to. Oh, I'm sorry. What was that, Joe?
Oh no, I was just going to mention we didn't really talk about pre or post fader. And generally, when you're using, say your lead vocal channel that you're adding maybe a nice vocal reverb to, you want to make sure that that bus that you're using on that channel is post fader, meaning that when you fade that person's vocal down, you're also fading down the amount of effect that's on that vocal. So that's example. Obviously, you would not want to use um, you'd want to use pre-fader for something like maybe the amount of vocal on that same channel that's going to the lead singer's vocal wedge, so that when you're adjusting that fader for the level in the house the audience is hearing, the singer's monitor wedge isn't going up and down in volume as you make those changes. So a few things to keep in mind.
Exactly. And so just remember that the final step is when you're sending to an effects processor, of course, you have to return it. And as Joe mentioned, a lot of times in the past, you might patch it back into a channel. But on the X32, we've actually given you dedicated effects returns on the third layer of the console. So you just want to go over here and click on aux, that third button, and you see these purple. The scribble strips have gone purple for us, and they basically just tell you this is effect 1, this is effect 2. So that effect, that hall I just put on, is actually returning right here on this pair of faders. So this is how you can kind of blend in your reverb with the rest of your mix. And like Joe mentioned, with reverb and a lot of time-based domain effects, time domain-based effects, this is really the best way to do it. It gives you a lot of control over how much reverb's in your mix and so on. So
What's nice too is by having your effects returning on that layer 3, that aux layer on the input side, those channels, not only can you adjust, the amount of effect you're sending to the mix bus, but you also can assign a mute group to all of those effects return channels. So, in between songs when the lead singer is talking to the audience, you can quickly, hit, it's right near your right hand, your mute groups. You just hit maybe mute group 6, and it mutes all your effects all at once.
yeah, exactly. Great, Joe. Thank you.
Okay, why don't we move on to another question?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll just read these, and if you want to take it, John. If you have a theater show set up with scenes, a video mix is needed on the last show. Can you add this across all scenes, or does it have to be set up for each scene? Like adding a matrix mix in at the last minute?
Right. The only thing I would suggest in that case is, and just give me a second, I want to try to figure this out. On the scenes, I'm going to save. Okay, here's how you would do that. I actually ran into this at a small show I was helping a buddy mix at the other day. We were trying out the X32, and it was a really small show. It's a local club, so it wasn't a situation where we had sound checks. So we were basically building the mix the first band, we kind of built our mix, and then we kind of built the next mix off of that, and so on. And that's kind of the same scenario. So what you would probably want to do is you could pull those scenes up, and you can kind of use the parameter safes. So maybe you'd want to say I want to safe all my matrix sends. I'm thinking, no, this might not work in your application once all the scenes are saved already. But oh, I know. I know. Once you have that last scene done and you have your matrix mixes set up, then you would just parameter save all your matrix sends and your parameter save all the matrix sends. And of course, I just clicked on mixes. There it
Under
is.
mix bus.
Thank you, Chris. You would save that, and then you would probably have to go to channel, and then you would have to save the matrices. And then when you went back and recalled those other scenes, it wouldn't overwrite your matrix setup. That would probably be the workaround that I would do. Obviously,
if you had like 30 or 100 scenes already, then that's probably the way to go when you have a last minute change. But if you only had 5 or 10 scenes or something, you might as well go change it. You know what I mean? It might depend on the scenario, how much work it really is. But yeah, if you have 100 scenes already and there's a last minute, all of a sudden you want that matrix to be, that's probably the way to do it, John. You're right.
you also could save channel strip presets for for each bus.
That's true.
Because if you save the channel strip preset for each bus, that would include its matrix send level. So you'd be able to kind of just load the preset on other scenes. I mean, all kind of workarounds. I know we've been following a couple of threads on the forums about theater and that specific application, and we're in communication with the team about ways we can improve this. So thank you for that input, and I hope that this helps a little bit.
Okay, we're getting a question about when you route mic inputs 1 through 4 to aux inputs 1 through 4, you don't get EQ or dynamics. And you want to just address a little bit the differences in the processing on the aux layer? And basically it just comes down to a matter of the price point of the X32 and how much DSP processing we have available and where we chose to use it. Obviously, you're getting full processing on all 32 inputs. You're getting even more processing on the bus section. Not only you're getting a six-point parametric EQ and full compression, but it is a little bit different on the aux inputs. And you want to go through that, John, for a second?
Yeah, like Joe said, basically we took the dynamics portion out of the aux ins, and as Joe said, it was kind of a processing thing. So we designed the X32 so that with everything that we allow you to do on here, you can engage every gate, every dynamic, every EQ, all late effects processors on every channel, and you won't run out of processing power. And we've designed it that way. It doesn't make you never have to worry about that. But part of that is the fact that we had to not allow you to do certain things. And like Joe said, we made compromises where we thought it would be okay. A lot of times you might just be using these aux-in channels to bring in an iPod or something for background music. And a lot of applications you might just need the EQ. So that's why when you're using an aux channel, those channels don't have the same DSP capability, and that's why even when you're bringing a mic through an aux channel, you'd have a limited channel strip. So I just want to remind everybody that, and the same thing applies on the effects returns. We've had a lot of people ask about wanting to be able to EQ their effects returns, and I totally get that. Definitely makes sense to me. There are some high and low shelves inside of a lot of the plugins, so to take a look for that, in the effects processors. But if you really want to be able to do that, if you have any extra channels, just remember that you do have the ability to say, click on channel 31, go to the config screen, and you can pull in that effects return, any effects return or any aux in. So maybe you have something plugged into the auxes and you want to be able to have a full channel strip. You can bring it into another set of channels on one of the 32 full channels. So you do have that ability.
Or if you're not using all 32 channels, you also have the ability to reroute channels, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I was showing on here. I forgot
Cool.
your screen's lag behind there.
I mean, that's one of the only areas that, I would say on the on that aux layer. I mean, I definitely don't need compression on my vocal return, yeah,
Mhm.
vocal reverb return. But it might be nice to have an EQ there. So, if I was mixing and if I had the extra channels, I probably would move at least my vocal reverb over to a channel that had EQ.
And
All right.
actually, on one more thing, you can even bring your effects returns in on the aux channels. Say, like Joe said, you probably don't need to waste the channel that has dynamics. You can just bring effects 1 and 2 into aux 5 and 6, and now you'd at least have EQ.
Yeah, totally. To reiterate one more thing too that John already said was as far as the effects channels that don't have EQ, a lot of the effects themselves have EQ. Like you can actually roll off the low end or the high end, which is typically what you're going to do with an effects return in the effect itself. John,
Really good point.
you could even show them if you click on effects. There's a couple specifically that you could show them.
Probably in these reverbs, right?
Yeah, not Vintage Room, but go to the ones that are like the. I don't think you have one of those four pulled up. It's one of the
Well,
one
you
with
do.
the blue line across the bottom. You know? Yeah, there you
Oh, sorry.
go.
The plate.
The plate. You're almost there. There we go. That one. I mean, this is just one of them. A lot of the other ones do too, but low cut,
Yeah.
high cut. That's what you're gonna do with
Yeah, it's
EQ.
it's it's too bad. I mean, maybe that's something that we could add. I'll have to talk to the developers. If we just even had some basic shelving filters, it's mainly the top end that you're taking off of reverb returns.
Yeah,
I mean,
actually, I'm
people
seeing
that
it.
want, yeah,
I'm actually seeing it here on the hall too, Chris. You have a high cut and a low cut.
right,
I
right.
think that's
So,
on a lot of these. Even on like on
yep,
the
even
delay
on,
has it.
yep.
So you do have that to work with. That's a great point. Thanks, Chris.
Okay, somebody's bringing up about daisy chaining two X32s together, and it's really not set up to do that necessarily.
Well, unless he's talking about a front of house monitor situation.
I think they're talking about using two of them together for like a 64 input board, and um, I mean, as far as I know, it's not really. It's not like you. I guess maybe in the future we might be able to do a cascade card or something that you put into both boards. But do
As
you
of right,
want to
as of
elaborate at all, John?
oh no, you pretty much nailed it on the head. It's really the only application for that for daisy chaining is like what we said as far as you can share audio between the consoles, but you
Yeah,
couldn't.
yeah, and I guess you could do it old school and do it with a bus. You know what I mean? Take a bus output and just feed it, return it into a couple of channels on the second board, and do it that way if you really needed to. But then, of course, you lose all of your busing capabilities and all that. But
Yeah, you still can't
um,
share buses. I just don't think it's designed to do that specifically for now. I like that idea of a cascade card, Joe. Should talk to you guys about that.
yeah, I'm gonna bring that one up. I might, that could work. I know that's how we used to do it in the old O2R days.
The thing is, if you need more channels, we already make that mixer. It's the Pro 1 or the Pro 2.
That's correct.
And that's right. Chris is talking about the Midas Pro one. For you guys that haven't checked it out yet, it's actually a fully legit, full Midas console for finding for the first time at under the $10,000 price point, and just under at 9,999. But it's still an incredible price for a Midas. If you're looking for something a little bit beefier than the X32, need more channels, want to run at 96K, might be the option for you. So take a look at that.
Yeah, it's a 24 input board, so you get less inputs right out of the box, but you can use their stage box to immediately get it up to 48 inputs, and it's quite a console. We were taking a look at it the other day, and it's really pretty amazing. Um, okay, I didn't notice the X32 has a built-in mic on the board below left encoder screen. Is this for talkback, and how is it used?
Yes.
I'm
Yes, it
sorry,
The
is.
answer.
And I can go to the camera and just show you basically really quickly how it would be set up. Okay, the way it is
Sean,
used
when
is
you
by
when you go through
pressing
the
the mute button
talkback, I
right by
just
the
wanted to
talkback
mention that.
section, and then you would page over Let me try to zoom in here just a little bit. There we go. 1 second, please.
While you're setting up for that, John, I was going to mention we did this console shootout a couple months ago where we compared the X32 to an LS9 in a studio live, and at the end of the event, the main engineer that was there from one of the area sound companies mixed a little jazz band that we had up on the stage, and it was really amazing. I've been a live sound engineer for a long time, and I've mixed a lot of shows, and I just always in my little Anvil briefcase carried, a basic dynamic mic, and I'd plug it into channel 32 or the highest channel on the console, and that was my talkback mic. And the talkback mic in the X32 works great. I mean, it was very easy to communicate with the stage, talk to them in the monitor wedges or whatever. So it's a great feature. In version 1.10, which is going to be coming out in the next couple of weeks, they're adjusting the gain stage of the talkback mic and also the makeup gain. So, I would suggest that anybody that's still using 1.09 that you back your gain down and your makeup gain down a little bit. Otherwise, you can get into some feedback situations. But that's going to be factory preset after version 1.10.
Yeah, great point, Joe. Thanks for that. And you can change your gain and back that off right in the talkback menu. It's actually controlled by this third rotary encoder. So this is where the talkback happens. You actually have two separate talkback buses, which allow you to set up talkback to two different locations. So maybe talkback A will be for the stage, and maybe talkback B might be for maybe you have somebody in another location of the stage, or whatever the case may be. So basically, for whatever talkback you want to use, we'll start with A. You can assign it to a particular bus, because since you're typically going to be feeding your monitor mixes or your monitor wedges from mix buses. So if you want this talkback to go to the lead singer, we'll go to mix. We'll engage. He's on mix bus 1. Well, there it is. Now if I press A and I just press the talkback button, actually by default, you can see the internal mic will work. Actually, it's picking up my voice right now. So it's as simple as that. And you have an option, this second option right here. If you want to switch to the internal mic, you can do that. And then you have. I
think having an A and a B, it's really a powerful thing, because you could be communicating to the musicians through their wedges on A, and B could be the stage manager backstage, or your monitor engineer. However you want to configure that. I mean, it's pretty powerful to have an A and a B on your talkback system.
Yeah, definitely. So you can talk about, you make sure you hit the right button if you're talking about the talent, right?
That's right. All right. Does scene safes exclude setting from being saved, or is it only active when you load settings? I noticed that you can change the X's on previously saved settings.
Yeah, I think it does just apply to the scene load, actually. So I think what happens is that it automatically saves everything. The scene files are so small. I would imagine that would make the most sense to me, and that way you could always go back and you'd be able to load a certain part of it that maybe you didn't want to load before.
Okay. Is there any way to do an auto mix on groups of mics, such as the floor mics in live theater?
That would be a really cool feature, but I don't believe we don't have any kind of auto mix plugins in the X32 just yet. Just your standard compression and gates, but not an actual auto mix.
I did talk to the development team a while ago about auto mix, because I know that particularly in a lot of AV setups they use a lot of those auto mix products, and so it's something we're looking into, but it's definitely not currently implemented. Will you be able to record? Oh, never mind. Sorry. Just to answer that, these webinars are going to be available. It's going to take us maybe 3 or 4 days after the event, to get them uploaded, but they're all going to be available for you to watch it at a at another time, or for anybody who couldn't make it today. And I think we're to the bottom of the questions. So if anybody has anything, just throw it out there, and we'll. If you want a live demo of anything, we're available to do it.
And actually, while we're waiting, I'll throw up that slide with our contact information, and we'll talk about service for a minute, just before everybody gets off the call here.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, maybe talk a little bit about our 3-year warranty, and as we're waiting for any other questions to come in, that'd be great.
Perfect. So as far as the 3-year warranty goes, I just want to let everybody know, if you haven't heard, earlier this year we went to a 3-year warranty, and I just want to spend a minute or two just to talk about how we were able to do that. Let's click here. So basically, when we took over the Midas Clark Technic companies, Mr. Behringer went to the Midas guys and basically asked them, what would it take to manufacture at Midas quality, in our factories in China? And they came back with a big wish list of some really cool manufacturing equipment and testing equipment, and it was a $20 million list, which is a huge investment to make, for a company in our industry in manufacturing. And Mr. Behringer, Uli went ahead and he did it. And so the result was, $8 million just in new automation. So automated surface mounting technology, 14 layer PCB boards being made by machines and then being X-rayed by other machines to make sure everything is right. And so we've reached a level of quality control and first yield passes that we've never had before. So, with that new quality and with our history of the last couple of years, I always like to refer people to other sources besides ourselves for quality. And you could take a look here. Thomann is our biggest dealer in Europe, maybe the biggest dealer in the world at this point for Behringer. And they actually publicly released their failure information on various manufacturers. So you'll see I have a green arrow pointing to Behringer's defect rate over 3 years is less than 1%. And this is based on all of the Behringer product they sell. And like I said, they sell millions and millions of dollars of Behringer product every year. So with the investments in the factory and the proof being in the pudding with our lower failure rates, we were able to go ahead and give you a 3-year warranty, which was really exciting for us. And so talking about the warranty, let's hope this is never an issue for you, but it is always good to know about service and how you can get help if you need it. So in the U.S., we have a brand new repair facility. It also houses our parts for not just Behringer, but Midas Clark Technic actually has a showroom over there. If anyone's ever in Vegas, I suggest you go stop by and get a tour of the Midas showroom. It's pretty amazing mixers they got in there, and they'll definitely be glad to show you around. So if you need to call in for service, there's the phone number right there, 702-800-8290. You just press 1 for tech support, and they've really got a lot more people there than we've ever had in the past. And I always call in the same way, and I'm usually on the phone with somebody within a minute or so. So it's been really good so far. One person's name you want to remember, especially if it's related to the X32, ask for Chase McKnight. We're all out here in the field, and Chase is kind of our guy that we call in on the inside. As far as all he does all day is answer questions on the X32. So I would go right to him, and he can help you figure out if you have a problem or if maybe something is just not configured properly. And finally, you actually have there's our direct email addresses for myself and for Joe. And if you have any operational questions or issues, feel free to contact us, and we'll put you in touch with Chase or whoever else you need to talk to. And one more thing I want to mention is I know we just converted in the UK. We also have a service facility, right, Joe? Brand new.
Yeah, that's correct.
So currently Las Vegas and the UK, but don't worry, if you are from other areas of the world, still obviously contact us, and we'll get you taken care of one way or another.
Yeah, we throw our emails out there too if it's an operational thing, as John said. I mean, this is obviously a very sophisticated product, and what we're running into is some of the things that come up that somebody thinks that they're having a service issue. It might just be a routing issue, or they routed a channel to another input or whatever they did. So some of those we can help you sort out, pretty quickly. So we're all here to help you.
Great, and I think we got some more questions rolling in here, Joe.
Okay, let's
The
see.
first one is, can I talk about the assign controls? So I'm going to jump right into that, and then Joe, you can get some more questions on deck for us.
Sure.
I'm going to show my camera again. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. So the assign controls are basically just that. They're user assignable controls that can be connected to any, well, not a large list of different parameters in the console. So some applications for this might be, maybe you want to have your lead singers send to his vocal wedge on knob 1, so that anytime he, gives you that look and points up, all you got to do is reach to knob 1, turn it up, and he can hear himself. That's a great application. Maybe you want to have a tap tempo for your delay, like we have right here, and you can set that up. Maybe you want to do a jump to page where you press number 12 and your EQ comes right up on the screen. So that's what the assignable controls are for. You have 4 encoders and 12 buttons, but then you also have 3 layers. Let me just adjust my light here so you can see that. So you have set A, B, and C. So you really wind up with 12 encoders and 24 buttons that you can use, which is really awesome. So to set them up, you just got to press View right at the corner there at the bottom of the Assign section. And now I'm just going to move the camera over to the screen. Just give me 1 second. I'm using a mic stand here. All right, great.
High-tech operation.
Now you can see that we
Exactly.
have. Oh, I'm sorry. What was that?
Nothing, just a joke.
We're just admiring your setup, man.
High tech all the way. At least the mic stand's not falling down like last time. So it is worth it. When the guys at the music store tell you to buy expensive mic stands, I found it actually usually is worth it.
It's true. I buy the most expensive mic stands because of that.
Yeah, you'll go through 3 of those 1999 mic stands before you that $100 one will last forever.
Google. Yeah, it's true.
Exactly. So what you're going to see when you press the view button is actually this screen, which basically is just going to give you an overview of what's already assigned. And then to assign something, you got to choose what layer you're working on. Because remember, you have 3 layers. So starting with the first layer being set A, we'll move over to set A with the page right button. And basically, you would choose what button or what encoder it is, and then you would choose what is it going to do. So, if I wanted that example with the singer, for example, if you wanted to put his bus send on an encoder, I could say, okay, encoder 1, what is it going to be? It's going to be a bus send. Okay, what channel? The lead vocal's on channel 10, let's say. So we want to do there it is, and his wedge is mix 1. So now my first rotary encoder is going to be the bus send for channel 10 to bus 1. So anytime he looks at me and he can't hear himself, I just grab that one knob, crank it up, and he's all good to go. One other thing I want to mention that's really cool about the assign section is that they are assignable to MIDI controls. So you can actually choose remote here, and I have an encoder selected, so I can actually put this on jog, and that basically turns my encoder into a jog wheel for my DAW, which I like to use a lot. So I think that's pretty cool. And then a lot of people asked about maybe a dedicated transport. Well, you can create one, because if you go to buttons and you go to remote here, there's all your transport options. So you could do like play and stop and record and everything, and just kind of set up a nice transport for you on the assign section. So yeah, really flexible.
Yeah, I really think that's it's something we can't stress enough with the X32, and I think a lot of that kind of comes over from that Midas connection. I remember the first time I got behind one, everything just kind of feels where it like everything's where it should be. You know what I mean? You're not second guessing yourself. You know what I mean? If you want to view what's going on with your kick drum EQ, you select your kick drum channel and you hit view on your EQ, and boom, it's going to be up on the screen. I know there's certain things like when you're mixing a live show that as John indicated, and Chris, I'm sure, can attest to this. The lead singer's wedge, you tend to spend a lot of time trying to get to that send to go to that wedge because they always want more monitor in their wedge or whatever. So having that, encoder 1 assigned to that lead vocal channel's wedge is great. Another one that's nice is if you assign a dedicated button to pull up your house graphic EQ. A lot of times you do sound check in an empty room and then the audience shows up and the whole dynamic of the room changes and you need to get to your house EQ quick. Well, just assign a button. So bingo, you're flipping right over to your EQ screen. And if you leave that GEQ on faders button on, as soon as you hit the button, your bus faders are going to turn into your frequencies for your house EQ. The other common one is tap tempo. You're just always have a dedicated flashing switch to go to your tempo for your delays because it's just real easy to tap along to the song and get the tempos going right. So just a lot of features that just make mixing a lot easier. We're down to our last 20 minutes, John, so I don't want to move on to some other questions.
Yeah, I have a nice one right here saying by default are channels mixed into the main mix. If so, what's the quickest way to remove a channel from the main and have it only feed one of the mix buses? Yeah, I think that's a great point you bring up. There's obviously a lot of times you're going to want to do that. By default, your input channels are routed to the stereo bus. And that's going to be indicated by selecting a channel. So I'll select this channel and see how my stereo bus light is lit up. I'll even turn this light off so it's quite obvious that my stereo bus light is lit up. If I disengage that, now my channel will not be going to the stereo bus. And so you can just really quickly go down the line, select the channel, remove it, select the channel, remove it, or engage it. So that's how you can take channels in and out of the stereo bus. Definitely a good point. Thanks for bringing that up.
Okay, the input meters on the board in meters screen are pre-anything. Are there a view for meters post-fader without using the solo button? That's pretty uncommon. Do you have any comments on that, John? I mean that's
no, I agree with you that it's a little uncommon. I just can't think of it in my world.
That's the nice part on the X32 is the mix bus really sounds great on this board, and that's always a big consideration whenever you're dealing with a digital console or you're dealing with a digital audio workstation. Kind of the way channels are being summed together, and the X32 has a 40-bit floating point mix bus. And as long as you're getting proper gain structure on all your channels, I mean, it's pretty difficult to drive your mix bus too hard and distort it. I mean,
and remember,
developers get into it's almost theoretically impossible. I mean, it's
and also remember that you do have pre-fadering metering on your buses. So if you're worried about sending too much to a bus, you could just check your bus metering and you would see if that bus was clipping. Actually, for example, right now I'll send a channel to bus 9 and you'll see that meter will start to go up. There it is. And if I'm sending too much, it would indicate right there that I was clipping bus 9. So that kind of, for me, that eliminates the need to see a post-fader meter. I'm not sure what your application would be, but hopefully that helps.
We got a question. Has anyone asked how to mix a previously recorded session through the X32 on a DAW such as Pro Tools? And that would just be reconfiguring the inputs to your, say, 32 inputs to the 32 inputs coming over the FireWire or USB card. Yeah,
you would basically just select card inputs on the routing menu. And then you would route everything out of your Pro Tools rig, out individual outputs. So kick would be out 1, snare out 2, tom out 3, and so on. So you got the 32 channels, and then you can mix out of the box on the X32. Let me also add that especially if you're using Pro Tools, Chris is hosting a webinar later today, and he's going to go over all that in extreme detail. So hopefully you can join him later today, or you can catch the recording of that later on.
Yeah, and
Definitely.
if I could comment, like I said, because I use Pro Tools myself, and I think it's great to be able to mix, out of the box, so to speak, on the X32 because you're getting, a dedicated EQ and compressor on each of those 32 inputs. You don't have to worry about bogging down and dealing with the DSP or the number of cards you have in your system or whatever. So it's great to be able to have all that processing and be able to have faders and everything else. So it's a pretty good solution. Do bus compression, etc. with the 16 buses. So a lot of options there. All right, what do we have? When will we be able to use the EQ and other effects on the iPad? Um, the iPad app is only going to get better and better as we go along. We're adding features as quick as we possibly can. Most of our bandwidth was just really trying to stay on top of anything that came up with the hardware of the X32, and we've been coming out with those firmware upgrades as quick as anything has come up. But now that we're through a lot of that, a lot of the bandwidth I think is going back to wrapping up some of those features on the iPad. I don't have dates and times for exactly when certain functions are going to be added in, but hopefully by the end of the year we should have a pretty robust iPad solution.
I'd say we have to ditto that answer for X Control coming out for Mac. It's definitely coming, but like Joe said, we're just it's only have a certain amount of bandwidth. When the programmers are working hard on the firmware and making sure the board is stable and operational, and we'll definitely get that out as soon as possible. I do want to mention that just any of you guys that have Parallels or Virtual Machine, I'm on a Mac right now, as you can see. So if you have any of those solutions, you can run it that way. I know some people on the forums have used a program called Wine Bottler, and that allows you to run Windows applications without even owning Windows. So maybe you'd want to check that out if you don't have any other options right now in the meantime.
We've never tried it ourselves, though. That's just based on forum posts that we've read, other people doing that. But I know under Parallels, it was pretty painless. We had it up and running in about 2 minutes. It's pretty quick.
And while we're on that topic, remember, you can download that software on our website, whether or not you have an X32. It's a great way to poke around, see how the routing works, see if it's going to work for your application. If you know you're going to be buying an X32 soon, you might download the program and get all your scenes set up. And so definitely check that out if you haven't already.
Yeah, great point. I mean, I know a number of people that I talk to who end up buying X32s, played around with X Control, and they actually said after they bought it, they kind of felt like just through using that, when they got on the X32, it was that much easier. It was just everything totally made sense. If we missed anybody's question, because we're down to about the last 15 minutes, if you want, retype it down below. I'm not seeing that we missed any, but if we happen to miss your question...
Connecting and configure a wireless router to the X32. We actually have a great video on that, don't we, Joe, on YouTube?
Yeah, I believe there is actually one on setting that up. John, since we don't have a lot of questions, why don't you just give some people some pointers on that? Because I know you have that one really down where you can do it in like 20 seconds,
Yeah, well, basically, you just need to connect a wireless router to the Ethernet jack on the X32, and then you're going to have to go to the setup page right here, and one of the tabs says remote. Well, I'm sorry, not remote. We're looking to go to the network tab, of course. So the first thing you're going to have to do, I'm going to try to get a good view of this for you. Hold on. It's a little bit better. I turn this light off. Does it adjust? There we go. That's a little better. The first thing you have to do is give your X32 an IP address. Most wireless routers you buy by default, they're going to be set in the 192.168 range. So I would make your IP address 192.168, dot zero dot maybe 10 or 15 or something like that. That usually is going to fit right into the range of the router without any other configuration. 9 times out of 10. Subnet masks, that's always going to be 255.255.255.0. And gateway is going to be the IP address of your router. So you would need to know what your router's IP address is, and there's a couple of ways you can figure that out. But that's basically it. Once you have those three things set up, you would go into X control, and you would, on the X control side, see how my IP address is 192.168.0.10. So I would just go to X control, and when I go to that same setup page on X control, there it is. I would just put that IP address in. Now, I don't have my X32 connected right now, so it won't show up, but this is about what you would do. But yeah, we do have that video. I know it's on our Facebook page somewhere, and I think it's on the Behringer YouTube. If you need any more assistance on this, definitely contact us.
How about this one? Can you move settings from one channel strip to another?
Absolutely.
That's one we could do real quick.
To do a whole channel strip, just click on the home screen. And if you're looking at this home screen, you could press utility at any time. And then the 5th and 6th rotary encoders, if you push the 5th one down, that copies it. And if you just select another channel, now you could go use the 6th rotary encoder, you can press paste. And because we're on the home screen, it'll copy the whole channel strip. Excuse me. If you wanted to just copy an in particular module, like say an EQ, just do the exact same thing, but from within the EQ window. So say I want to bring this over to channel 3. I'll copy it, go to channel 3, and paste it down. And you'll notice I just have the equalizer that I'm copying. So you can do it by channel, or you can do it the whole channel strip. You can do just a EQ, you can do just a compressor, and you have these options for the routing presets and the effects presets as well.
I know we're at a little after 12, and while we still have a strong group of people on the call, I just personally wanted to thank everybody for coming this morning. I know your time is valuable, and I hope the information that we provided is worthy of your time. And we're going to be making these events available. So if there's anything that we went over too quickly, or you want to review later on, we hope to have the webinar up and available online. Hopefully by early next week, I would guess. But we're also going to be rerunning this particular webinar live as well, probably at some point next week. So on my behalf, thanks everybody for coming out today.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. I really enjoyed doing this. I like this topic in particular, and we just all want to make sure that you guys have the information you need to get your X30 to really realize the power of what the X32 can do. So. Again, don't hesitate to contact us for any questions you have, or keep watching more webinars.
I just wanted to point out a few questions came in asking where they can go and look at previous webinars or this one. We just finished the overview one that we did from this past Saturday. So we're going to be trying to get that up. We need to work with our internal web team figuring out where they're going to place these actually on the Behringer website. So hopefully we're going to have that all sorted out by this coming Monday, and we'll try to make that information available to all you guys.